Hi guys, welcome to The Social Block, the podcast that explores the intersection between blockchain technology and society. Since you already know what this podcast is about, I'm not going to lead you through it in every intro anymore. And we're going to go right into our episode. Today's episode is more on the infrastructure side. So if you're a builder, I think this is great just in terms of hearing it, listening to what's out there, what people are thinking about it. And then if you're more on the end user side like me or just not a tech person, I think our guest was really good at explaining some basic concepts about nodes, about recent upgrades in the Ethereum ecosystem that are going to be really helpful. Our guest today is the founder and CTO of Chainstack, Eugene Asseev. And we talked about why blockchain should become boring. We talked about global elastic nodes. We talked a little bit about the Ethereum Dencun upgrade and blobs. And finally, I think what was really, really interesting was our little discussion about the sweet spot between usability and decentralization. Hi, Eugene. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
So since this episode is about infrastructure, it's about you guys, why don't you start by telling us something about yourself and your company?
Sure. My name is Eugene, and I founded a company called Chainstack. What we do is we provide the ultimate Web3 development platform. So we offer access to tools like Node, RPCs, data APIs. So what's our mission in a nutshell is to provide a fast, reliable, and easy way to access Web3 infrastructure for everybody who wants to build anything in the blockchain space. So we started around 5 years ago at this point. So we are quite old company, quite well established. And as other people say in the industry, we are in top 3 providers in the space, which we are very proud to be. We are very proud of our customers as well. So we have some notable customers such as Nexo, as well as Trust Wallet and Chainlink and many other well-known players in the space. We are very horizontal platform in a sense that we have customers from all verticals. So we do not specialize on particular vertical because our services that we provide are pretty generic and everybody needs them, which is a good part about our business. So we are very happy to have customers around all the verticals in the Web3 space. And since we support more than 20 chains, at this point of time, we also enjoy to work with all types of communities and ecosystems, starting from Ethereum, Bitcoin, the oldest ones, up to the most recent development in the space. Of course, all the L2s we support, and some other L1s like Solana we also like working with. So we are very agnostic towards like the ecosystems as well as the verticals of our customers. So very happy to be in the spot because it's very nice and it's interconnecting different ecosystems as well. So quite a good spot to be.
Yeah, I definitely feel what you're saying about how it doesn't matter what business niche you're in. If you're in the blockchain space, you need infrastructure providers to make your business efficient, to be able to function without, sky-high fees, delays, and so on. So I was going to ask initially when you said you support over 20 blockchains, I was like, oh, I know, like we didn't discuss this question, but I was going to ask which ones you think are really going to make it in the long run and are most important. But then you were just like, oh, we're blockchain agnostic.
Exactly. Yeah, we just had a short talk about this today. We had a crypto wakeboarding session with some of the local folks in the morning, and like one person asked like, "What's your blockchain religion?" And I said, I don't have a particular favorite blockchain. I like all of them, and I hate all of them at the same time for different reasons. So it's like, yeah, we work with a lot of the chains. And of course, there are challenges working with most of them in reality, because this is the space we are in. It's very nascent. There is not much stuff that's been battle tested, maybe except for, Bitcoin, which has been running for a while already.
Was it like 15-ish years?
We love exploring. Yeah. It was started very long time ago. So it's pretty battle tested. It haven't been broken for very long time. So it can be considered, I think, production ready. But the rest of the blockchains, in fact, they are sometimes they are called beta, sometimes they are called alpha, sometimes they are beta but not called so. So it's quite interesting space to be in because there's a lot of experimentation and changes.
I feel like with Bitcoin as well, I think it's so stable just because it's meant to do less things. Whereas with the other blockchains, they're all kind of trying to do a lot more initially, and that's why I think things are getting a little bit. That's why they're so, not ready yet. I think they're perfectly workable solutions, and they're getting there, but they are very young when you think about it. But what are some of the
Indeed,
pain
yeah.
points in working with blockchain and in general in the infrastructure sphere of the blockchain space? What's not working right? Where are businesses and providers like yourself running into trouble?
All right, this is a great question. I can rant about these problems for
Do
hours,
it.
so it's a
Go
good
ahead.
question to ask about. So, in a nutshell, all this software that we operate as blockchain node software is pretty newish piece of software, and in most cases, it's written by enthusiasts. So, if you think about how, let's say, Ethereum was written in the beginning, it was written by Vitalik, who is extremely talented and intelligent person, but he's not a production software developer. So the early concepts of Ethereum were written by a very very intelligent but enthusiast, and so this trend continued over time, over years. And so what we have today in many cases is that this blockchain software is not written by software engineers, but it's written by research people, those who like to create new concepts, maybe sometimes scientists. And so in the end, they are all great ideas and they are all great concepts with implementation that sometimes lacks production stability, if you say so. So if you take any blockchain software that is written today, is far less production ready than any centralized database like PostgreSQL or MySQL or any other database. And in this sense, being a software as a service company like Chainstack is a challenge because you need to operate all the software that is not necessarily developed by production grade software engineers, and in even more cases not being developed with with the operations in mind. So when you write a blockchain node, you very rarely think that, okay, there will be some people who will be actually running this stuff on scale. And we need to think about observability and metrics and, how things are exposed properly, about security and all this kind of stuff. I would say that recently it became a bit better. So all the new development has some sort of, idea in mind with regards to, the production grade quality, as well as like DevOps practices and all this kind of stuff. But largely speaking, especially all the older blockchains, they haven't been developed with this, peace of mind for those who will be operating the chains. So from one side, it's a challenge. From another side, it's an opportunity as usual, because for those who want to interact with blockchains, it's a separate challenge to run a blockchain node. And so for us, it's an opportunity to cover all this pain and headaches for them and basically provide them a managed service for blockchain nodes. That's exactly what we're doing. And managed service for blockchain data. That's exactly what we're doing. So in this case, if you want to interact with a blockchain, if you want to send data or read data, you don't necessarily have to run a node, which is the kind of original way to do it. But also you can do it through providers like Chainstack, or there are a bunch of others as well, and you can choose them and you can select the providers that you want. So it's similar to the cloud, I would say, in a sense that basically you don't have to run your own server. You don't have to run your own, software like, I don't know, Apache server for, serving your HTML pages and all this kind of stuff. You can just go to big cloud provider. You can go to small cloud provider. You can go to your regional cloud provider, and so on and so forth. You have a wide selection of options, and they will do this kind of boring stuff for you so that you can focus on the value creation. And so from our perspective, yes, of course, it's pain, but we take this pain on our shoulders so that our customers are happy and they can sleep at night and they do not wake up for incidents like, every other hour because their node is not syncing or something like that. So it's a challenge and opportunity at the same time for us as a business.
So basically, if you compared it to cloud providers, right, and servers, so you don't need to run your own servers, and the cloud provider basically kind of links you into their server and everything. But with you guys, the server is the equivalent of the blockchain, right? In this analogy.
Exactly. It's a
And
high level abstraction. Exactly.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's cool is that you can still be the provider and like be a company and everything and be that point of contact for another company so that like you're standing between this whole decentralized ecosystem where I think for a business, it's very difficult, especially blockchain being so young, having enough specialists who are versed well enough in blockchain to be able to address incidents at all and any time, which is why you need some kind of provider in between that to interact with the blockchain and make sure that, a business that's stay focused on, I don't know, stupid idea, selling NFTs, whatever it might be, isn't always, going batshit crazy over like, we don't have enough blockchain developers, we don't know what we're doing. So that's like kind of how I see it. So it's cool because you still have the decentralization in the background, but you have someone coming in, kind of swooping in and being like, we'll provide the service so that, you don't have to find a team of 500 blockchain devs to, take turns and sleeping at night.
Exactly. I compare it to to internet providers roughly. I mean, it's a loose analogy, but I like it because it's very self-explanatory. Because you have internet that is by design decentralized, and you have different pieces of this infrastructure which is not in the same data center, obviously. But you also have like internet providers, for instance. And in Singapore, we have 5 different internet providers, and I can go on each of their website and select the plan. And that plan actually differs in terms of pricing and in terms of, gigabit per second I can get, and in terms of support and in terms of reliability. And I can actually choose, I can pay like a dirt cheap plan for like $10 per month for very low speed, or I can pay like $100 per month for like premium, redundant line, etc. And I think it's great. It's because you give all these options to people, and they can choose. And then if I'm a crazy tech person, I can maybe use 2 providers or maybe 3 providers. I can have like 3 lines going to my apartment because I'm afraid that one provider can go down. And this is the same for the cloud. Like people use multi-cloud in general today, so they don't rely on one single provider. And that's also applicable to our business. Like we have customers who are using Chainstack, but they also use Alchemy together, or maybe within Fura together. So it's the same kind of thing. And of course, it doesn't really break the decentralization aspect of blockchains anyhow, because if you want, you can still run a node at home, and nobody can prevent you from running a node at home, and you can still access the same data if you want. So that's great thing about blockchain. It's relatively easy to run a blockchain node at home or at your own data center, or at your own cloud account, versus getting access to internet without service provider. So it's actually much more accessible, and it has much more democratized access to to these blockchain networks. Because if you don't use a service provider and you want to access internet, I actually don't even know what you need to do. How do you access internet without service provider?
I'm not
right?
a very techie person. I have no idea. So I would be that first person who's just like, I'm completely lost. I guess I'll just go back to the dark ages. Just read my book. Um, but when you were talking, I had this like really cool thought about how I feel like infrastructure is so important to the blockchain space and like infrastructure providers and everything. But media wise, I feel like we're so much more focused, and like the public eye is so much more focused on all the companies providing financial solutions or just like some kind of really wacky metaverse or art solutions. But nobody talks so much about the infrastructure providers. And meanwhile, they're the backbone of the whole thing. I feel like you guys are this like behind the scenes ops team that's always standing there, and you don't get enough coverage. And as a PR person, I get annoyed when I see that, because I feel like this is the reason, we talk so much about blockchain's potential, but we don't talk enough with or about the people who are probably closest to helping us discover it.
Right.
Yeah, that's like really off topic. I wanted to go back to the
I
pain
agree.
points.
Yeah, I agree, and so I would love to also give more light to, let's say, Node software developers, because they are doing a great job. And like you have all these L2s and Ethereum forks, and there's actually core team in Ethereum, Go Ethereum client, which is a bunch of very professional folks who are now maintaining this client and bringing updates. And if you think about like Ethereum, for instance, it now covers a lot of these financial applications, as well as like carries all these financial value. So, and if you think about it, there's a core team of perhaps less than 10 people who are actually developing the software that allows to do that. So, of course, kudos to all the blockchain node software developers, because they get even less coverage, I think, than service providers, because there's, of course, a lot of that they can talk about, but they never, they never are in the spotlight of, people who do, media and people who do podcasts. So this is definitely even further, down the rabbit hole. There are some even more core people to this, because let's say if Chainstack ceases to exist tomorrow, it will be a breaker towards the decentralization or towards the blockchains to develop further, because we are just one of the software providers. But if, let's say, Ethereum development team will cease to exist, then it will be a bigger challenge, because you will need to find and replace this kind of people so that they can bring upgrades and maintenance and fix bugs and so on and so forth. So
and
it's a good point.
Like we talked about earlier, there is few enough of those people that, people that are competent enough to even step into those shoes. So yeah, and when you mentioned Ethereum, I was thinking about the pain points again, and how I feel like they're mostly scalability in terms of like how many people, how many transactions can a blockchain like Ethereum handle at any given time. Gas fees are becoming a huge problem, and you see people running around through all sorts of layer twos, different blockchains. Like, we're searching for a solution with the gas fees, because they're getting really intense. And you see providers kind of also trying to also give people perks with like, okay, we'll cover the gas fees for you be our clients and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk a bit about that. And I think one of the things to talk about in recent news is probably the Dencun upgrade with blobs. And so my understanding of it is essentially that blobs are a new way of storing transaction data, and it can be used a lot by layer twos. Do you want to kind of lead our listeners through that? I understand you probably have a better understanding than me.
Sure. I mean, I don't have a perfect understanding, but I have somewhat understanding that allows us to, I think, to continue the conversation on the topic. So, blobs, in a nutshell, is a way to store data on the blockchain for a lower price than before. Why is it possible? Is that because blobs are actually not storing the transaction data; they are storing some arbitrary data that cannot be really accessed from the EVM itself, and hence it becomes much cheaper. Unlike cold data that was used previously to store most of the data. So it is important for those people who need to write arbitrary data to Ethereum, but they don't necessarily need to access it through the smart contracts or through the EVM in the end. So who are these people who want to write this data to arbitrary data without having access to this data through EVM? These are obviously like usual suspects, like L2s and all sorts of rollups that basically use Ethereum as a security backbone for their operations, as well as other interesting use cases. So recently, this update went through just a few weeks ago, and a few L2s started to leverage it, like Arbitrum and ZK Sync and Base and all the leading L2s, and that's where we've seen the gas prices on their respective L2s going down. But then I'm not sure if you heard about ETH inscriptions or
the blob
encryptions in general.
News. I read the blob
Correct. Yeah.
So
basically, what happened a few days ago is that this inscriptions, they made use of blobs now, and if you look at some stats from last few days, inscriptions take up to 50% of blobs generated today, which is quite a huge amount of blobs if you think about it, and so it's basically more than all the L2s combined as of today. And so the blob space is also managed by the fee market on Ethereum. And so now pricing of writing to the blob is now entering some sort of price discovery mode, where it will be defined what is the actual price, what is the actual interest for people to write into this blob storage. Having said that, it's still cheaper than writing in the cold data, which is a good thing. And there are also a bunch of ideas how this can be improved further with like data availability sampling. In this sense, blobs are data availability layer on Ethereum, and so there's more efficient ways to prove the security of this data. And I think Vitalik wrote a nice blog post about it just a few days ago about how this can be improved moving forward. But yeah, this is a great improvement, I think, to not Ethereum really. This particular EIP is not was not built for Ethereum. It was built for those who are building on top of Ethereum really. And since Ethereum was mostly around, like Ethereum evolution is mostly around layer twos, then this was a particular sort of feature built for Ethereum L2s that is in line with also like Ethereum roadmap in the end, because that's how they see scaling to progress further.
Yeah, I think I read the Blobscriptions news. I think it came out on Friday or Thursday, somewhere there. And yeah, just for our listeners, basically what Eugene said, the price of gas really soared when the Blobscriptions hit, and then it kind of went back down. And Vitalik did call it price action. Price discovery mode. I think that's what he called it. He handled it really well, though. I like how he acknowledged that, okay, yes, this did happen, but then he was like, despite this happening, the price was still like, it would have been way higher if something analogical had happened before we'd introduced blobs or something like that. So I think he was very rational about it. And then I think what was it, over the weekend, where he basically, Vitalik beckoned the masses to enter the blockchain space and the Ethereum ecosystem in general, and it was through layer twos. And he specifically said it's because with this upgrade, essentially, L2s can support millions of users. That's like what his thesis was there. And I think it was like specifically around non-financial use cases of blockchain, which I was particularly fond of. And I love that, leaders in the space are thinking of it in that way, because I think blockchain is more than finance. So yeah, this was definitely like,
right.
I'm so glad you mentioned Blobscriptions, because I was following the story from like Thursday throughout the weekend, and specifically Vitalik's reaction, because I think he's a very interesting figure. Like you said, he doesn't come from like this like very dev only context. He's more of like a he looks at the big picture and he thinks about it that way. So
yeah, he's definitely a visionary. Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Alrighty. So I just quickly want to talk about Chainstack's solution, actually, because when I was, like Eugene said earlier, Nexo actually uses Chainstack. And I know you guys have something called global elastic nodes. Can you tell us what that is? Explain the infrastructure solution a little bit.
Of course. So nodes, as we just discussed 10 minutes ago, is this kind of software that basically runs the actual blockchain. So the blockchain comprises of network of nodes in general case. And so in order to access to blockchain, like for instance, you want to create an NFT, you want to meet it on chain, or you want to read some data from the blockchain related to your DeFi application, you need to route this, through the node, because node is the ultimate storage of data that is happening on chain. So what Chainstack does, it abstracts away the complexity of running a blockchain node for you. But then it becomes the more users of the blockchain come, the more distributed the consumption of this blockchain becomes. The more users from different geographies come. You need to build something that is accessible for all, that is fast for all, and it's ultimately 100% reliable, because this is what infrastructure is meant to be, is meant to always work. And that's why also it doesn't get proper attention, is because people just assume it works. It's like if today there is no light in our houses, or there is no internet, we just like frightened, and we don't know what to do, because we just assume it works all the time. And so, especially in the developed countries, right? So we expect things just to work, right? So it's exactly the same with like infrastructure, and in particular, blockchain infrastructure is not specific about this. Is exactly the same. People just expect it to work all the time in 100% cases. So global elastic nodes is our solution to cover all of this requirements in a way that basically we run. Let's say we take Ethereum for example. So we offer a backbone of nodes which are hosted in various locations, in various data centers from various providers, as a network of our nodes that we offer as read-write solution for our customers. And then we have a layer of load balancing on top that makes sure that whenever a user makes access to this API, it gets the closest node and it gets the healthiest node in this pool. And so it gets the latest data, in the fastest way possible. And because we use all this, distributed network of providers as well as data centers and geolocations, it is very reliable because if one provider goes down, then we have another provider to back up. If two providers go down, we have another few providers to back up, and so on and so forth. So it's the ultimate solution in our perspective for this, blockchain API problem, because basically it gives you very fast, very reliable way to get access to the blockchain for read and write. So this is our flagship product as of today, and we are very proud of it because it beats all competition with regards to reliability and performance. So yeah, we are very happy about this product. We are continuing to develop it all the time to make it even more reliable and even faster. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what our global Elastic Node product is about.
Nice. I think that's more or less like the understanding of it I had, especially when I was, initially looking over some materials. But I had a very interesting experience with ChatGPT, so you can correct me if ChatGPT was wrong here. But I was struggling to understand, the difference between a regular node and what a global Elastic node would be. So I went to ChatGPT and I was like, ChatGPT, help. Can you explain to me, like I'm 5, the difference between these two things? And it was like, well, imagine you have a giant library. That's the blockchain. And then your regular node is your, standard librarian. So when you need a book, you can go to the librarian and you can be like, I need Gone with the Wind. And they'll go and they'll get you Gone with the Wind. But imagine you need a really old or rare book and you need it really fast. And then you have these special, more efficient librarians that are more specialized that you can go to, and they can basically retrieve data more efficiently because they're specialized, be it by, like you said, I think it was, well, one thing was like can you explain that bit, like how your nodes
I think this is what I now try to deconstruct the ChatGPT's response for our listeners. So basically what the AI was referring to, I think, is that our global Elastic nodes are also encapsulating all types of nodes available on this network, which means that there are, generally speaking, in most of the networks, two types of nodes. One is a full node, one is an archive node. So full node is something that most of the people use because it contains all the recent data. And those who need historical data, for instance, to have a chart on the price or have some historical balances on the chain, so particularly like, wallets or exchanges or portfolio builders and such, like traders, they all need historical access. And so our global Elastic Node service, it encapsulates both full nodes and archive nodes at the same time. So you basically use one endpoint for the network, and you stop thinking about accessing the network in any way and shape and form, because you just have this endpoint that allows you to get everything and to also send everything that you need. And all these details, all this routing that happens between like full and Elastic and different regions, data centers, and fallbacks and backups, it's done for you. So in a way that ChatGPT is quite right. It's a specialized solution for those who need the ultimate access to blockchain data on chain. And that's the way how you do it, through one single endpoint, and you don't need to understand, okay, this endpoint is for archive data. So if I need archive data, I need to select this endpoint. And this endpoint is for latest data. And if I come from Singapore, then I need to access it. Or if I come from Netherlands, I need to access the other endpoint because it's available in Netherlands. So all of this logic is encapsulated in our product.
So basically, your product basically takes the client directly to the type of node it needs to get its data most efficiently.
Exactly. Depending on the type of requests and other metadata, like the location of the user and other metadata as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot more sense now in the context of ChatGPT's weird. It definitely explain to me like I'm 5 very literally, because I had a good laugh with it, but I was like, I need someone to explain this to me more literally. So
actually, next time you should try to ask it, explain like I'm 20, but I'm not a big expert, because it could actually give better explanation, more tailored. So it's actually
maybe,
quite, the ChatGPT, it works when you do prompting
Yeah, when you prompt it
really in a
properly.
professional way. So yeah.
I know
So
I'm a really bad
the prompting
prompter
is
because
sometimes a solution.
I have a very let's say just colorful vocabulary and a lot of metaphorical expressions and stuff. And I often like I'll write something in ChatGPT and it will give me something completely ludicrous and I'll just be like, ChatGPT, no, I didn't mean that.
Yeah. Actually, I think this it's funny, but I think this skill emerged much earlier on. I will explain why. Because previously, because I figured early on when all the search engines appeared that I'm really good at prompting the search engine, because sometimes it actually depends really high on how you actually ask the question for search engines, even
Yeah,
pre-AI,
definitely,
era.
definitely. Even just
And so I
keywords are
figured
better
that,
than
okay,
asking the question.
exactly. And so I figured that most of the people are actually terrible in prompting the search engines, which is kind of skill, I guess, to learn as well. And so prompting is the same. It's just much more complicated now, because you actually, if you prompt badly, then you will have a very bad answer. And search engines, the price of error is not that high, is that you might not find the information you want. But in AI era, it can start, creating all this kind of weird,
Hallucinating. Yeah.
hallucinating replies to you. So it becomes more important. But this is a real skill for sure.
It is definitely. But like most people don't even know how to use the advanced search on Google. So there was,
Right.
I think it was an American researcher, but I can't remember who said that the main issue with the GPTs is that they give good results based on our ability to coherently explain to them what we want. And he's just like, the problem is that 90% of people don't have the language eloquence to express what they actually want.
Precisely. Yeah. Precisely. It's a morphological thing. It's not even a technical thing. So it's not even about like extra filters and such. It's a morphological thing. It's like how you structure your sentences and how you structure your questions.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting field, actually.
You also need to be careful. Like I said, like my main problem is that like if I speak very metaphorically, it just sometimes takes it literally. And that's where I have to be like, okay, I need to put my math brain on, not my literature brain. But
Right.
anyway, moving on to the next part of our episode, I know that Eugene wanted to talk about decentralization versus usability and that balance. So, in that sense, do you think that usability is a trade-off of decentralization and vice versa?
At the moment, I think it definitely is. If you look at all types of solutions that are actually enabling users to use blockchain, that they are all highly centralized solutions, starting from it's not a secret that companies like Chainstack and Infura and Alchemy, they are highly centralized entities, for example. But also, if you think about other pieces of infrastructure, like all the L2s, they're also highly centralized entities today. So if you use, Base from Coinbase, it's very centralized. It has a centralized sequencer, which is run by Coinbase. And so if something happens with Coinbase, you don't have Base anymore, and so on and so forth. So, and like if you think all about this, like account abstraction tech, it's also relatively centralized today because of the pieces of infrastructure being, run in a centralized fashion. And what I wanted to say is that it's definitely not a blocker for us to progress further. It's just we need to be aware of long-term picture and long-term implications of this. And the genuine projects, I think they should have a roadmap on like how we're gonna operate in like 5 or 10 years and how it's gonna look in 5 or 10 years. So, for example, for us at Chainstack, it's clear that you should use multiple providers, and if you run something in production, right? There's also this deep-in ecosystem that is emerging recently. I have some controversial feelings about deep-in and like how should you actually decentralize access to blockchain data on top of blockchains that are already decentralized. I think it's a separate question to discuss, like whether it's a thing or not. But definitely, having some redundancy in place is important. For instance, for service providers like Chainstack, for L2s and other pieces of infrastructure, it's actually hard to say. I think, unfortunately, people have to do their own, research and do their own due diligence on the chains they are working with, and they are, putting their finance on. Of course, as we understand that, 90 5% of people, they will not do research because it's just more complex, that they would like to dig into this. But yeah, generally it's a very interesting topic. I don't think there's a answer that satisfies all the needs, and I think we are somewhere in this blockchain trilemma nowadays, which is of course a trade-off between usability and decentralization today, for sure.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot because when you initially were just like, I want to talk about this. And it took me back to a conversation I had in the first episode for this year with Aseev Khan. And we talked about, because I'm not sure if if usability is really a trade-off of decentralization necessarily, because what he and I talked about was how the blockchain space is like kind of this ecosystem that's a lot of blockchain people. And he was just like, his opinion was that a lot of the people who are going to dev cons and stuff they're the people who weren't necessarily, he said, the popular kids. And I get what he means by that. It's like maybe they're not, the best communicators. They're not on the user-facing side. That's just not the way they think. They're brilliant in their own way, but they don't think on the front end of things, the end user. And I think that because blockchain has pervasively been built up of those people for the last 10 years, mostly. Like even when I was first joining in, because I started in the blockchain space in 2019, kind of late in the year. And I remember how I started as a copywriter, but I was working mostly with marketing and comms teams, PRs. And the partners I was working with, the partner organizations had like one or two PR or marketing people, sometimes maybe a maximum team of 5, which is, those are tiny teams when you think about the scale of this thing. And they were all kind of young people, like people in their 20s, maybe some fresh out of uni, just like me. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I feel like the whole user friendliness and usability side of things, the ability to actually make it easy to work with, is something that has just been neglected for a decade. And of course it's behind. So that's why I'm not sure that it's decentralization in itself that's the problem. I think it's the infrastructure that's made to be sort of unfriendly, just because we haven't been thinking about that. Because that's, like you said earlier, when you're so passionate about building something, you're more passionate about building it. And it's like, does it work? Yes. And then you're not really thinking about like, can anybody use it? How do I popularize this? How do I even capitalize on it? Because we're, when somebody's very enthusiastic, usually they have this like, the starving artist mentality. It's like, I want to do this at all costs. I don't care that, I'm not getting anything out of it, which is beautiful, but it's not very practical. So that's one thing I was thinking about. And the other thing I saw, it was a headline I actually saw this morning when I was eating my breakfast. And it was a decentralized DeFi headline, but the headline read, D-Gate offers a CX-like experience on chain. And just looking at that headline from a communications perspective, to me, tells me that the DeFi guys are starting to realize that their UX is not up to snuff. They're realizing that there's like a gap in their market. They know that they're missing out on clients, on people with money, on people who maybe want to participate in the gains. So they're trying to kind of copy CeFi. And I think that's fantastic. I'm just like, you guys have the right idea, but just like your headline gives the game away for, people like me who are looking for that kind of thing. So that's why I'm not sure that it's trade-off.
I agree with you. That's how all technologies appear and evolve. In fact, so blockchain is not really new with this regard. So if you think about all the recent technologies over the last 200 years, whenever they appeared, there were mostly people who developed it who were perceived weird or perverts or geeks or you name it, and then the majority was trying to say, okay, this technology is not what we need, so we need to stay with what we have. It's already good enough. And so it's how progress works, really. But what's important is that I think there are two things that are important. First, I think this like convergence between this early core people who are really passionate about the technology and really want to do it right, and then the actual majority of people who this technology is pretty much built for in the end. This should diverge. It sometimes takes tens of years. So I don't think, again, blockchain is very special about it. If you think about internet, when it was built in the in the very early days in like
Well, we
the
are going a
70s and
bit
80s.
faster,
It
though.
took
Like, I think
yeah,
we're going
well,
a little bit
because
faster.
yeah. Yeah, because we're in like singularity age
Yeah.
already, so everything is going a bit faster. So there's higher entropy. But generally speaking, I think it's okay. It's just and the second important thing first is this convergence between those enthusiasts who want to do the things in the right way, and the second is this majority of users. And the second thing is important is whenever we converge, we should not we should try not to divert too much from the first principles, so that in a way that we don't have a systemic risk in the system that basically will say in the end that okay, we are now centralizing these things so that user experience is amazing, and now we have a big systemic problem because some companies are too big to fail potentially, or some solutions are too big to fail, and if they fail, we have a lot of issues. So we've seen this last year, of course, with some of the players who were quite big already. We see this in traditional internet technology as well, with like this giant social media company. So imagine, or and if we think about the lower levels, about like electricity or like internet connectivity, is also there's a lot of risk there from the provider's perspective. But what I think is important is to get this like critical mass of solutions that will give enough redundancy in the space, so that even though these providers of solutions are centralized per se, then there are like just thousands of such providers. And so if one provider goes bust or goes down or whatever, it's not a big deal for the entire ecosystem. And so that's, I think, I don't know, I call it distribution or redundancy. It's not really decentralization, maybe per original term, but I think that's where we should land in this like myriad of providers for different kind of services, and different chains and different APIs, etc. And you have a lot of choice. And even like the examples are everywhere, right? If you buy a display for your PC, you have like how many vendors that provide like displays? Like
Yeah, but
30
this
vendors. You
is
go.
what you're saying is essentially exactly the definition of avoiding monopoly. And there's a reason there's
Yeah.
like antitrust laws in various countries, especially in the US. I know they're quite strict about
Right.
that, because the minute you don't have any
Right.
competition, you control, it's like whoever controls the spice controls the
Exactly.
universe.
Yeah.
That's where
Right.
we're going here. Yay, June
Right.
is out, guys.
Dune.
Who's seen it? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I think you're right with the providers, and I actually read a piece. It was by somebody called Tanner Philp. Like, I don't know who the person is, but it's a Medium article. You can find it. I'll link it in the description as well for the listeners. But it was very interesting because he talked about. I've talked about this as well before, even like back in episode 1, where like decentralization as a spectrum, where you have like the hardcore, everything decentralized people on the one side, and like a centralized, comfortable provider on the other. And what I really like about the blockchain space is that as an individual, you can kind of choose where you want to be for yourself. You're just like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not very advanced. I'm going to like, kind of meander through, say, my bank, and then maybe go to a fintech that gives me a little bit of exposure. Then maybe I'm going to try getting some crypto. So like you can pick and choose for yourself. But I know a lot of people are quite lazy, and they don't want to be that self-sovereign in any way. Like they don't want to actually have to seek out those solutions on their own and, say put half of their money in DeFi, half in like, I don't know, on Coinbase, and then like whatever they're earning now in their bank. A lot of people don't want that. They want to have their one bank and have everything in one place. And when you think about business models as well, that's also how they work. Have you noticed how like you have like someone who provides a certain service in the crypto space, and then they just keep like widening and broadening their service into like a 360-degree offering? I think that's like a natural business model. So what this article was talking about was how this person perceives a convergence somewhere in the middle between the decentralization we're talking about and the technology we're using, and the more centralized companies, somewhere like in a golden middle, which I'm a little bit concerned about, because I think like that could very easily, like you could get the 1 to 2, maybe 3 big players, and it's going to turn into Facebook, Amazon, Google all over again. So I'm a little bit worried
Could be.
about that. But on the other hand, I'm
That
just
could be.
like, I also think before that, right now we're in a different phase. I think right now we're in the equivalent of what Northern European countries do with intuitive city planning, which is what they do is they'll wait in the winter when it snows and they'll see where the people walk, where the tracks are. They'll take pictures. And then when the snow melts away, that's where they build the path where the most tracks were, rather than building, paths and grids and then being annoyed that people are walking on the grass. So I think
Right.
that that's the phase we're in. And I really hope the blockchain space kind of embraces this intuitive approach. And I mean, ideally, it would be great if, we would still have like different providers and they would partner with each other, but not necessarily become one. But I think that's kind of wishful thinking, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's possible in one of the future universes that we have all these Facebooks and Googles of crypto, and I think we sometimes see this even today, like
Yeah.
with some ginormous companies trying to get the majority of market share, and I think that's just the nature of business models that were practiced in 20th century, and so there are for instance, this is how VC works entirely.
Really?
So VC is optimized for growth. Yeah,
Yeah.
VCs basically they want one portfolio company out of 100 to grow 1000x. And what 1000x means is that they grow from zero to become a very, very large player. And sometimes you see companies that actually don't need to grow because they are in the comfort spot. I mean, one of my favorite examples is this company called Postman. And so this company, it's a software company. And so what they've done is that they created this very cool UI tool to create API queries, right? And that's what they've done. Like instead of going to the command line, which is inconvenient, like now all the people who are not familiar with command line that could open this like UI tool to send API queries. And so it opened up the whole new market for people, for QA or for developers that is, just more accessible for them. And then because they're VC funded, they started, okay, the VCs are started, okay, you guys need to grow like 10x from there. And it's literally a tool to create API requests. So there's not more to add. And they started to add this like features. And now if you install Postman, it's like a bloat of, features that people don't require in the API querying tool. And so my point is that I think not all the companies should grow until they are like ginormous in size. Some companies are just comfortable where they are, and just the whole notation of growth is just making this monopoly also alive, because it's just like every company should grow infinitely, right? So
Yeah,
I think that it's totally fine. Yeah.
it would be totally fine if, I guess, we have a lot of like different, both decentralized, centralized, or mixed companies partnering with each other. I think that would be ideal rather than swallowing one another and becoming one big thing. That's where
Yeah.
it becomes scary.
Well,
But
for
where
this,
I think,
for this, I'm pretty optimistic. For this, I'm quite optimistic because what is cool about blockchain in particular, and which doesn't exist in other ecosystems, is the composability on-chain code, right? So that's what DeFi shows in a very bright way, is that basically you don't have to rebuild something that other people rebuild just to become competitive. You can actually build something on the
just on
side,
top.
and you can plug
Yeah.
in their contracts. And this Lego block thing is amazing, and I think, and it's my personal probably top 3 favorite things about blockchain is that it's
Yeah,
composable.
but you know what worries me, and where I think we're gonna like really hit a brick wall here, is regulations. Because I feel like regulations, like how basically, I think it was Gary Gensler, or was it Gary? I don't know. Sorry, Gary. But anyway, I think it was him who said that everything except for Bitcoin is a security, or it was something along those lines. And I was thinking about it, and it was like, well, because Bitcoin is the only ecosystem, the only blockchain where, you don't have a foundation. They can't find an entity behind it. You have developers who are developing it, but they can't find an entity the same way they can from all the other ones. And I think that's where like regulations are based on having that centralized legal entity. And if you don't have an entity, what's going to happen? And I think with like all of these newer projects, a lot of their creators can't disappear the way Satoshi did. They will be found, I guess, because we've got the spotlight on the space right now, and that's why I'm a little bit worried about whether we'll be able to retain the inherent decentralized, entities because even like DAOs, a lot of people are like doubtful about whether, how decentralized are they? Aren't they just, going to get made to create a legal entity or something? And the minute you have that, you're just kind of losing a little bit of the decentralized, you're chipping away at that. So I think regulation is going to pose a huge challenge to retaining decentralization.
Right.
And
That's
like,
for sure, yeah.
And not ending up with, the basically just them being swallowed up by centralized companies who had an edge with regulators or in regulation in general, just because they were, I guess, a little bit more prepared. They were operating as a standard company either way. So that's what I worry about. And I'm just like, fingers crossed that it doesn't eat up, because I think it's a beautiful part of the ecosystem.
We cannot avoid it because this is the regulation also partially, of course, a good thing because it protects, in some cases, the majorities from being wrecked. But I like the approach of, honestly, I think that some things are hard and they should be done. It's like one of my favorite books for startup operators and entrepreneurs is Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And why it's great is because it provides you billion examples of how hard it is to build a startup, and actually like some hard things that needs to be done. And I think working with regulators is another hard thing that needs to be done if we want to succeed. And in this sense, of course, I admire efforts of Coinbase and others who are trying to work with regulators in a constructive fashion, not trolling them in Twitter and trying to attack them or trying to sue them, but really, of course, trying to sue them sometimes as well, but mostly in a constructive way, which I think it's great.
I think you said
this is, of course, a hard things to do. But
it's about working with them. I just hope that they also work with us, because I know that with all of this decentralization, I think it kind of, they're just like, there must be someone behind it. And we're just kind of like, well, you gotta understand. So I hope that it becomes a two-way process, because I think that that's when we'll find this sweet spot rather than, being more destructive. We had a couple more questions left. One of them was about the use cases, the compelling user cases for crypto. And then the other one was security challenges. So I'm going to let you pick which one you want to talk about. Is it maybe...
Sure, let's do the compelling ones, because security can be another episode.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that for me, like the best use cases for blockchain are still financial, but in a way that basically simplifies the financial life of people today. And by this I mean mostly, it's a probably corny term today, but like banking the unbanked. Because in the way that traditional finance works, it's in many locations actually works pretty well. Like if you take Singapore as an example, everything works really well here from financial perspective. If you need to transfer money from one company to another, from one individual to another, it just works. We have the alternatives of like very very fast payments with zero fees, and there is no brainer, but. There are a lot of countries, and I personally have friends in many of them where this doesn't work, and like traditional financial system doesn't work and doesn't help to do even like transfers within the borders of the country. I'm not even talking about cross-border payments. So I'm a big fan of financial use cases for crypto, in particular payments. I think this hasn't been really discovered yet at a large sense. So we don't really send crypto to each other, largely speaking. I try to push myself and like my community to do this more and more. So it's funny, we have a crypto community in Singapore, and there are some events that are being organized, and then you pay a bill at the dinner, and then basically they say, okay, send me this like in fiat via this very simple banking button to send money. And I say, guys, like it's a crypto community. Let's send together USDC or something.
We do the same thing with my Nexo colleagues when we're having like lunch, and then like we want to split the bill at the end, and everyone's just kind of like, send me. Everyone's like, oh, can you send me like this many USDT? And people start like, And the cool thing about, say, the Nexo app is that it's user friendly in a way that you can do that very easily. But I know that that's not true for like all my colleagues. Like some of us are using different wallets. Somebody prefers like a hardware wallet, and I think that's where it gets a little bit.
Right. Well, you can always have a mobile wallet for for lunch
Yeah,
expenses. I think it's fine. That's
it's
that's
fine.
what also cool about crypto. You're not limited by number of wallets you have and number of accounts you have. So you can have in the bank you have just a certain limit of banking accounts you have, but in
Exactly.
crypto you can create them on any chain and any you can have a self custodial wallet. You can have a like a custodial wallet. You decide, right?
And it's a matter of habits. It was the same thing, when those like fintech apps like Venmo, Monzo, Revolut were coming up.
Yeah.
In the beginning, people were like, oh no, I'd rather just split the bill in cash. And now everyone was like, I don't have cash. I just want to like
Right.
Venmo you the money, because it's a matter of taps. And I think it's the same with crypto. We already
Right.
have enough solutions. Like I know that I can use the Nexo app to just send someone like 2 USDT for the Diet Coke that they gave me because I'm completely addicted
Right.
to it. It's I can do that. It's just a matter of habit, and then the other person also having some kind of like app for their crypto where they can receive it and use it effectively. So I think it's just about like a
Right.
migration, and these things happen a little slowly. Like you can't just start one day and then expect everyone to use it. It's just going to take a few more years.
I think what's important is that for people who work in this space is to 100% dog food this, because that's what I see not happening all the time, and that's what I really embrace, and that's what I really think we should do. That like those who are working in the industry, we should use the solutions that we ourselves practice, and so practice what you preach. I think it's very important
I think that's
in
such a good point.
in crypto at this phase.
For use cases, I think I've said this before, like my go-to use case for blockchain in general is actually not financial. I think we should use it for identity, specifically in the public sector, because I have this like unfounded fear that like if something happens like to my ID or to the like even just like the governmental institutions where I am that like basically validate who I am, where I can go, because I have this fear of like not being able to go all over the world because I love to travel, whether I can drive, all of these things. Like if that just disappears, that would suck. And my health records, like
Yeah.
my medical insurance, all that kind of stuff. I would like to be able to have some self-sovereignty in that area.
Right.
But the issue, of course, is like to what extent would that be recognized internationally? So that's my killer use case. And I think just to
Right.
end the episode on an interesting note, guys, before we had the episode, I was emailing back and forth with Eugene, and he wanted to ask me why blockchain should become boring. So why?
So I think that the the blockchain word should not appear in end user solutions at all. So we should for customers, it's not important whether it's blockchain or PostgreSQL or MySQL or TCP/IP or any other technological stack and blockchain eventually is a part of technological stack of building applications for people. And so I think that my simple message is that if you want to build something that people would use, large audiences of people would use, don't put blockchain in any of your communication. Like don't put blockchain in your product name, or don't put blockchain in your product description. Just explain like what kind of problem you solve. And in this sense, it should become boring as TCP/IP or MySQL, which are amazing technologies and they're the backbones of our tech space today. But they are pretty boring. Like nobody says TCP/IP is exciting, or like you have like sort of L2 on top of TCP/IP, which is like an application layer that runs your like HTTP requests. Nobody is talking about this these days. It become completely boring, even though it's a very important piece of technology. So I think in this sense, blockchain should land there as well. Not in the landfill of boring terms of technology, but in the sense that it should be avoided in all sorts of end user communication, and that's what I mean by being boring. That people should not think about using blockchain.
I'm a little conflicted on that, and I've said this before because I feel like I worry about how many teenagers I see completely addicted to Instagram who don't even know how an app works or how it's created. And I feel like that could get so bad in terms of like, I feel like we could get to the point where we have children who use calculators and stuff who don't even know basic math. And this is
Right.
a kitchen conversation I had with a colleague a while ago. And we were talking exactly about how people need to grind a little bit to learn a little bit. And
Right.
that's why I'm a little bit conflicted with whether or not we should approach people with the word blockchain at all in consumer based
Right.
communication, because I'm a little
Yep.
bit like, I feel like you should know. And the reason I say that is, again, because of unchecked centralization in the world, because everybody thinks it's perfectly okay to have their little passport from, their little country. And what happens one day if somebody overthrows the whole regime? Like, come on. I don't know why I'm afraid of this, but I don't like unchecked centralization in the public sector.
Yeah.
And that's why I like blockchain. And then I feel like people don't understand what blockchain can do for them. I feel like when it comes to finance, yes, we're at that point where maybe we should start sunsetting the term and then just letting the front end face.
Yeah, but you said the right thing. They don't know what a blockchain can do for them. So just let's explain them what can be done for them if they use this application, like
Yeah, I guess.
explain the value proposition. to
Yeah,
them,
because I feel like the term is also a little bit of a turnoff for the people. It's not what it can do; it's the term.
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying.
It's just people think, like the developers of applications, they think if they add blockchain, by definition it will explain what's good about this
Yeah,
app. And
no.
unfortunately in 99.9% it's not true, because people even don't know this word. And so let's just convert it to explaining the value prop that blockchain brings to the end users and communicate this that is clearly explainable to people. It's like
Another communication trend that's actually an issue. I had a conversation with a lovely lady I work with in one of the associations, INATPA, and she mentioned that she feels like crypto is actually obfuscating blockchain. So the way crypto at one point was becoming a little bit of a dirty word for public sectors, like we were talking about it in terms of like the education sector and the public sector, but it's like transferred onto blockchain. So even like saying the term sort of turns people off onto the actual like perks. So I do get what you mean. Like you need to explain what it does. You don't need to just leave it as a buzzword. I just wonder to what extent people are awake enough when you explain what it does. Like, do they understand the change you're making, or are they just like, oh, USPs? Because I feel like with all of the advertising going on, people are just kind of like, this is a USP, this is a USP. Like they just switch off a little bit. We filter when we hear that kind of language. So I wonder. I don't know.
I hear you. I
have to think
understand
about
what you
it.
mean. I don't know though if it's a technological problem to solve, or it's more educational or something. But I think it's a good point.
It is. It's communicational. It's educational. But I do understand what you mean. Like, I don't know. I'm conflicted. I was like very much in the camp of like have to say blockchain. Now I'm in the camp of like, I don't know. I go from one end to the other all the time.
It's good to be conflicted. It's also a tool for progressing further. So it's nothing wrong about being conflicted.
It's just because through the podcast, I feel like I talk to a lot of people, so I get so many points of view.
Right.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Since I think it's time to wrap up, I always ask my guests in the end whether they have some final thoughts or messages they want to send to our listeners as we wrap up.
Well, I think that because you have a lot of crypto native people as listeners, and those who really embrace this technology, I would reiterate on my words that I said before. Guys, let's use this technology. Really, let's do our best to explain this technology that we built ourselves to all our friends, and let's try to have some sort of Trojan horse, and like basically explain them in a way that they would understand, like how they can value from it. And that's the only organic way of getting adoption. I don't think we can get it with some bright marketing campaign explaining people that blockchain is a new thing. I think there's a hard grind we need to do as builders in the space. We need to explain people how to use it, and maybe in some sort of friendly way introduce crypto and blockchain to whoever we interact with, especially within the communities. Sometimes it requires some limitations towards other technologies. Let's say don't use fiat for payments to each other. So let's dog food this, and let's not assume that this will be done at some point, and it's up to some other people to work on the adoption of this technology. So my last message is, guys, let's dog food this technology, because I see it in many cases not happening with those guys who are actually building on the blockchain.
I think that's a good message for the end. And I love that you're using the eat your own dog food metaphor. I think that's going to stick with people. Alrighty, guys. So that's our episode for today. And join us next time on The Social Block.